You know, after hearing all the talks today and some of the snippets from yesterday, I think that this is going to be a very interesting topic that a lot of us are having a lot of problems grappling right now. Is we are working on a lot of very technical things, but how do we translate that to something that not only our CISO would be interested in, but also the CTO and maybe even the CEO or other C-level organizational types. You know, it's important that we get to know what our data is and also how to present it. So with this, I'm going to go into some of the things that I've faced on challenging this metric quandary and some of the successes that I've had, but also some of the failures of putting something in Excel or putting something on a document and then presenting it to my boss and getting that very quizzical look of, boy, this is really nice, but I don't know what you want me to do with this data. A little bit of background on myself. I've been in cybersecurity for about 4 years, with Time Warner for 2 of those years, and I've been in IT in total for about 8. Been a SIEM administrator for those 4 years as well, covering many different gamuts of some of the SIEM solutions out there and realizing some of the pros and cons that come with all of them. What I've noticed as I've started working with a lot of different SIEM solutions or frankly cybersecurity data in general is that there are a lot of disparate data sets out there, some of them that we do want to connect, some of them that we don't want to connect, some of which some of us might find interesting, but other people will not. And as I go through the slides, I challenge you to think about what the CEO, what the CTO, or what does the CISO think that you do every day? And as I've been listening to a lot of the presentations, I've gotten the same reaction from my CISO and CTO that I believe a lot of others have had as well, is, well, everything's working fine, so I'm just going to let you be. Or, I think that we just purchased $1 million solution. I know we purchased $1 million solution. I'm assuming, it's a terrible word, assume. I'm assuming that everything's working 100% correctly. And little do they know, we're working more than 8 hours a day. Or the alerts that we're getting might not be the best alerts. We do have a lot of issues, and I think all of us do, with the data that we're seeing. And it's not any of our faults. But how do we make sure that the people who sign those checks and budget for everything are the ones that know what those problems are? Some of the challenges that I have faced right off the bat with trying to make metrics is the metrics normally are just not that clear to upper management. And for me, it's because I come from a technology background. I don't come from a management consulting background or a metrics background. So immediately when my boss says to me, I want you to get some metrics for a big meeting that we're going to have, the CTO is going to be in town, we want to make sure that we show him what we do. Oh, great. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is look at our SIEM platform. And what's really nice about the SIEM platform is it comes with some really awesome metrics. You know what the bad thing about that is? It also comes with some really bad metrics at the same time. But because that we're technologists, it's the first thing that we look at. In fact, it's the first thing that I look at. So I'll look at it, and I'll say, oh, wow, look at all these geometric shapes that are popping up on my screen that I really haven't seen from geometry class back in high school. These are very cool-looking shapes. I want to use them in the presentation in some capacity. So maybe I'll pull in the funnels that a lot of us are probably very used to seeing, or graphs that show trends that might be cool trends, but maybe not something that would be interesting outside of cybersecurity or even IT. I noticed that when I started doing metrics, I would look at events per second. I would look at the amount of alerts that we were getting. I would look at maybe some of the countries that we were getting some of our alerts from. Things that I, as the analyst, found very interesting. And I quickly figured out most of the people didn't find this all that interesting. When I started presenting it to my boss, and more importantly, my boss's boss, they didn't really know what to take from these metrics. They didn't know if there were actionable items from this. Was I trying to say that we were getting hacked every second of the day? Or were we not getting hacked at all? There's a lot of different ways that you might be able to manipulate the metrics. The amount of alerts that we get in SIEMs could be a very good or very bad thing. I'm sure all of you who have worked with SIEMs in the past and are still working on them, you might be working on the implementation phase still. The implementation phase is one of those phases that really never seems to end along the way. But the problem is a lot of times upper management doesn't know that. When they think about all of the products that they have purchased for the cybersecurity group, they believe that everything is pretty much at 100%. And I heard that theme a lot during a lot of the presentations. And I know that I go through it in our office as well, of does the CTO, does the CIO know that everything is not reporting at 100% capacity? I bet you if you were to go back to your bosses right now, they probably think that the majority of items that are in the environment are also being reported into the SIEM as well. And one thing that I noticed at Time Warner and other places that are larger companies, and I remember this from the PowerShell talk, is we don't ingest desktop data. A lot of companies don't ingest desktop data into the SIEM, frankly, because it's just a lot of money. We have to get all the events per second. We have to look at all the logs. This is a lot of money. However, if you were to bring that up with upper management, there's a chance they might not think that. They might think that we are taking in all the logs from all the different sources. So I challenge you to think about, what does the CIO and what does the CISO talk about, maybe as just grabbing a cup of coffee? Are they assuming that everything is going wonderfully smooth in the cybersecurity department and all the money that they have invested in the company or in this group is being used for something that is useful and also that is at as much of a capacity as it can be? Or do they not know anything about what you're doing? One of the meetings I had with an officer over at Time Warner, I quickly found out how little they knew about what the cybersecurity group did. And I think the fault fell on the cybersecurity group because we should have talked about what we do and how we do it just a little bit more. Maybe a parallel to this is we all work in the general gist of an IT department. But do you know what the database admins are doing on a day-to-day basis other than just doing database admin work? No, they're probably doing a lot more, but do you know what they're doing? They probably don't know what we're doing at the same time either. And it would be good for us to really show how strong of a group the IT security and cybersecurity groups are to not only other groups in IT, but also around the company as well. So like I was saying before, when you look at some of the metrics that come out of a SIEM platform right off the bat, they're not some of the best to use. They're good if you want to talk to some of your other coworkers about some of the events per second that you're seeing, or maybe some of the log sources, but they're not something that you probably would want to give to upper management. And one of the talks that I had heard earlier, I think parallels to this very well, is that none of us really want to give access into our SIEM solutions to other groups. There's a lot of different ways that we could utilize the data that we're getting, and the other groups could utilize the data, but we're not exactly terribly thrilled to let people into our systems. And in fact, the joke of somebody who had really asked for access and then never logged in is very, very true. But unfortunately, that person who had asked for access also has no knowledge of what was going on in that SIEM to begin with anyway, even if they did not log in. So that's something that when you look at these metrics right off the bat, especially the built-in ones, they're made for us. They're made for the technologists. They're not as much made for the people who are signing the check or who are looking at the budgets. Are the reports actually going outside of your cybersecurity department? Are they, at the very minimum, going out to the CTO? Are they going out to groups outside of the cybersecurity organization? These are audiences that really should know and need to know that this organization, A, exists, and B, that you're doing some really, really good work, and you should evangelize the fact that you're doing all of that good work. If it's not going outside of there, how can it start going outside of there? I know that when I started doing the metrics program, I found that it was very tough to just put pen to paper, almost like writer's block, and try to figure out what we're trying to put into a metric. And because of that, there were not a lot of metrics that were being had. No one was really giving out metrics from the cybersecurity group, or if it was metrics, it was very, very internalized. It was not something that we really wanted to show outside of the organization. And going back to my example of, do you give somebody access to the SIEM solution? Well, let's flip it on its head a little bit. Let's just say the CIO or CTO invites you into a meeting to go over what your day-to-day job is and what some of the challenges are. Are you going to be opening up your SIEM and showing them the dashboard of all the different alerts that are coming in? You probably are not. You are probably going to want to do much more of a detailed analysis of what you're seeing and also, much more importantly, what some of those challenges are that you're seeing with your solution as well. And I remember this when I first started looking at metrics and started going over them internally, is that I wanted to talk about the successes of the group. I wanted to talk about how we've gone through 200 alerts per day. Or we wanted to go and we fixed up maybe 1 or 2 incidents per day that had been escalated along the chain. But what I did not talk about in the metrics was the fact that we were still not at 100% reporting for all of our devices that were in there. The fact that we did not have enough capacity within our SIEM solution to keep data around for X amount of hours. And the PCAP discussion that I heard earlier was great, and it's true. There might be, especially those who would have that technical acumen up in upper management, who think that we are keeping a lot more data than we actually are. Again, we don't want them to assume that we're keeping the data. We want to be as upfront as possible with them about what we have, but also the challenges of some of the incident response, some of the SIEM issues that we're seeing, so they know, especially as they start writing those checks and start budgeting for the next year. What does upper management, when I talk about upper management, I'm talking about board members, CTOs, CIOs, what do they truly care about? It is money. It always comes down to money. Are you getting any type of return on an investment? And when you look at all of the work and time that goes into SIEM solutions, and this is just one part of cybersecurity, we've got a lot of other things that require resources, that require time, and that require investment. Training is one of those as well. How are we showing that we are doing a very, very good job of utilizing that time, utilizing those resources correctly? What is the rationale? And I did hear this in another presentation earlier where, upper management says, well, what have you done for me lately? I have all this money invested in you. I have all this money invested in the cybersecurity group, but frankly, I don't hear much from you. Or you're taking care of alerts. I think everything's going well, but they just really don't have a good gist of what's going on. They need to know if they need to invest in talent. There are definite shortages along the way of people who understand the full SIEM solution from soup to nuts, whether that be the implementation phase all the way up until it's the analyst looking at it from a day-to-day perspective. But I know in our group and many other groups out there, we'll start getting alerts, and those alerts require a lot of knowledge behind them as well. For example, I heard on the side of the room here, if somebody doesn't know about very basic networking, that does put a damper on some of your triaging for some of the alerts that come through, or as you're setting up some of the alerts and getting those alerts sent over to you guys. However, is it more incumbent on you, the analyst, to do the training and to learn every last thing and every alert and knowing everything that comes through? It's impossible. You're not going to know everything, but you should also let upper management know that, hey, there's a little bit of a skills gap. I have somebody who knows a lot about system admin work, and that's their bread and butter, and they've moved over to cybersecurity or IT security afterwards. But on that networking side, we have the SIEM up and running. The SIEM is doing a really, really good job. But when we start seeing alerts that include load balancers or include routers, we find that we really don't know how to respond to those alerts. And if you ask me, I think that's fair. I think it's fair to communicate the fact that you don't know how to respond to some of these alerts and to let the management know that, hey, you've invested a lot of money in the solution. And again, it's not just the solution. It's the time, it's the manpowers, and everything that goes along with it to make sure that you know how these things should be responded to. We have a question over here.
Actually, it was more of a statement. I guess there's no doubt about it. Upper management's concerned about investment, ROI, and all that sort of stuff. I've had some success lately with presenting a balanced and very simple risk profile.
Mm-hmm.
Upper management now cares about risk as well.
Yes.
At least in my sector, and we present that kind of information, and we're actually getting some updates.
That's a really, really good point you made about risk as well. And I don't know about you. I think you had said you're the one-man team on your IT. That is awesome. That is awesome. You know, in our group, we have risk professionals. We have IT professionals. You know, we run the gamut of IT security within the group. And to piggyback off that a little bit, I found, you know, forget about maybe the CTO or CIO not knowing some of our day-to-day. I also found out pretty quickly that some people just within our own team don't know all the different things that go along with our day-to-day jobs. You know, just as we may not know about risk management or privacy, or that's not our specialty, just some people in our own group aren't 100% sure what we do. And in fact, there was one question that I was asked at a meeting. You know, it was a very basic question from another team member. Well, how do you ingest alerts, or how do we even get alerts? And it was a head scratcher to me, because in my mind, I said, well, wait, and I didn't say this out loud. I'm thinking to myself, you're all part of the same team. Don't we all know that SIM solution that we have? And I found out, no, they don't. You know, they don't know a lot about what we do. So if they're not fully involved in the SIM from right off the bat, there's, you know, to your point, there's people who know risk, there's people who know other areas, but they might not know all the different work that goes into what we do as SIM professionals. Some of the best success I've had with metrics is trying to tell a little bit of a story. So to reiterate earlier, a lot of what I've done in the past with metrics is say, hey, we've got all these events per second and it's coming from different countries, and it's cool, it's sexy looking for a cybersecurity analyst to look at, but it didn't translate well to upper management. So what I try to do now is talk about the stories behind what our day-to-day and, you know, month to month and trending things are within the SIM community, within our incident response areas. You know, some of them are we overwhelmed with alerts? You know, we had 2 SIMs at the time. One SIM was giving me seemingly 1 million alerts within a year's time, which is obviously a bit of a tuning issue, which is obviously maybe we're just taking in too many alerts. But a lot of that is operational based. And, you know, we're not able to put on our security hats as we're looking at different alerts when we have 1 million different alerts coming in. And even at that, we tuned the alerts down. We brought them down to 200,000. Still something that is way too overboard. But I wanted to tell that to people. You know, I wanted to say, hey, you know, we are tuning, but it's going to take us a while to figure out what alerts are actually false positives, false negatives, all these different things that we're going through. But we're not doing the true security analysis that you might think that we're doing right now, because we're doing a lot of tuning. And tuning takes manpower. It takes manpower away from your analysts looking at different security alerts. You know, they're going to have to be doing a lot of tuning in the background to make sure that this SIM is up to par and is working correctly. Yeah, and a few other things that I'd like to bring up as well are the devices reporting. And this has been a major pain point, and I'm sure for many people in here as well. Are all of the devices that you want in your SIM solution reporting correctly to the SIM device? So I've done metrics just on that alone. And I've been trying to figure out, hey, you know, we maybe have, I'll throw out some numbers. We have 2,000 assets that are actually onboarded or part of our SIM solution. But we're really only ingesting maybe 60% of those type of assets. And it's for a lot of different reasons. Maybe syslog isn't configured correctly, or there's internal firewall issues, or you name it. There's many, many different reasons why an asset might not be reporting correctly. Are the logs not being forwarded right off the bat? However, when I brought this up to our CTO, I quickly figured out that he thought once we onboarded or took everything into the SIM solution, that we were just taking care of the entire company. So it broke that ice of letting him know, hey, you know, we're doing a lot of operational things on the side as well, along with doing incident response, along with looking at SIM alerts, and looking to see how we can get you know, things much more streamlined than they currently are. I learned a lesson the hard way when I first started looking at metrics, and I wanted to get, I believe it was a flow collector for one of our SIM solutions onboarded for the next budget year. So I gleefully went into my boss's office and I said, yeah, I think we need this extra piece of equipment for the SIM solution. And his response, not surprisingly, was, well, why? And, you know, what can you do to quantify the fact that we need this? what I figured out is that I had brought it up a little bit too late within the budgetary year. So one of the lessons that I took from this was, if there are deficiencies, whether it be in the product line or something that is homegrown or something that you just need a little bit more of a investment in knowledge in, it's good to bring that up front as soon as possible. And it breaks the ice a little bit of showing that your metrics are not going to be 100% perfect all the time. But it shows like, hey, maybe in January, I state we need to know a little bit more about some of our net flow activity. And currently, we're not receiving that data right now. And let that simmer with upper management for a little while. Provide them even more metrics along the way, maybe monthly or quarterly, and say, hey, we're able to see this event, but if we were to do that correlation with some of the net flow data, we could absolutely pick up a really, really good event and alert. And compare it to maybe some of the best practices that are out there. But most importantly, just getting that conversation started, because they're going to have a lot of questions. They're going to ask, how much is it? What type of manpower is needed? What type of knowledge is there? And you don't want to bring that up when it's the last moment, or even worse, during an incident, and you're looking at the incident data and you find out that you cannot get the data or the answers that you need. That is the worst time to find out that you need it. Granted, there's all these post-mortem activities that you can do, but if you nip it in the bud now, it won't look as bad even during some of the post-mortem activities too. Are you finding that as you're looking through alerts, the alerts are being closed maybe a little bit too quickly? Are they being open for way too long? Is it something that you need to investigate? And it's something that upper management should know about. So I'll think of a good example on my side. We do not have access, nor do we want access to some of the firewalls, and I'm talking about like CLI type access into the firewalls, in order to do some extra investigation. But what we found, especially during off hours or times when it was a little tougher to find somebody, that we just couldn't get access to the data that we needed to complete the investigation based on the alert that we saw. And this happened again and again and again. And it wasn't, throwing stones at somebody. It was just, hey, we're not able to fully complete the alert or fully triage the alert until we get this information. So what I did is during my status update with my boss, I stated, like, this is the problem. This is the problem that we have. And most importantly, we try to offer solutions. Offer a solution of, if we get X log to go into this Y collector, we're going to be able to do a little bit more correlation than what we're doing now. I don't think that it's going to take too much in terms of resources in order to pull this information in, but I also want to make sure that you guys know way before there's an incident or we're looking at alerts that this is a deficiency that we are seeing. One of the best ways I have found to really make sure upper management knows what cybersecurity is doing in IT security is to branch out of the IT realm a little bit. And a lot of the themes I have heard today throughout my career in cybersecurity is we really want to take out the false positives. And that is true. Absolutely. On a security basis, we do want to take out the false positives. However, what I have found is some of those false positives are very interesting little tidbits of data. They might not be interesting to a cybersecurity person, but they might be interesting to someone who works in another department, who might not know that you exist to begin with anyway. But this is a really, really good way of actually showing that A, this is a really good organization, that we have a lot of data, and B, we might be able to help you out a little bit as well. I know this has been a theme during this summit as well, and I have found a lot of success with it along the way, of going out to different groups and saying, hey, we've got this data. We've got data that might help you out. I'm not giving you access to the platform, but I want to let you know that this is here. And I'll talk about that in a few other slides as well. When I do my monthly metrics, I've noticed that though graphs are nice and they look beautiful, and it's a lesson in geometry sometimes looking at some of these graphs, I like to do case studies. I like to do a case study of an alert that we have had within our SIEM environment that has been very good, just in plain English. We were able to detect that there were Windows logins from somebody who was sitting in New York at the time, and then 2 minutes later was sitting in another country. Obviously, that is something that we all know is a bit of an anomaly. So that's what I put in the case study, is that, hey, at X time, we were able to figure out that there was an anomaly. And then our group was able to go out to the correct desktop support team, or was able to go out to Active Directory team and disable that account, mitigating the control, or mitigating the risk of this alert that we saw. What I've also found success with is a case study of something that really didn't go the way that we were hoping for. For example, we have load balancers within our environment. They do a wonderful job on the operational side of things, but for those who have tried to integrate a lot of load balancers into your SIEM solutions and incident response platforms, you probably find that it could be a headache. You many of times get the load balancer IP address instead of the actual IP address that you're really excited about. The problem is, what I was finding is that it was an accepted issue within the cybersecurity group, and it was not something that was ever talked about outside of cybersecurity. We had brought it up with the correct team, but we hit a lot of resistance. We were told that it's going to take X amount of time in order to get the issue that we wanted to see resolved. But the problem was, though it might take time for another team, we were deficient on the alerts. So I put down in our metric, our monthly metric, was that, hey, here in this case study, we were able to get this alert that stated that there was external communication coming in or out. But the problem is, I have no idea how to find that IP address. And this is the reason why. When I gave that case study out to my management, who also talked about it with their management as well, it came crystal clear that though they had, and when I say they, upper management, had invested all this money and all this time into our platforms and our labor, we still had a lot of work to do. And in fact, that ended up being a great impetus for us to go over to the team that was able to fix this issue along the way, and now we have some better reporting. So utilize the case study to your advantage. Don't just utilize the case study in plain English to show every success that you have, because to be wary about successes, sometimes it means that you don't need extra help, or that you might not need an extra analyst when in fact you really do, or in fact that you do need some help with making sure that the alerts or the assets or things are logging correctly to you. So utilize it both ways and try to get the most out of both of them. So this is where I have found the most success in getting into upper management's thought process, is that we have a ton of data. We really do. And no matter what the argument either way is of, do we allow somebody access into the platform, or do we allow people to look at our metrics? We do have a lot of big data sitting in our platforms right now. And like I had said earlier, we do a lot of work trying to get rid of false positives, but some of those false positives are little nuggets for other groups. So one great example I had with this, and we had stumbled upon it, but I have really wanted to talk about it for a while now, was we ended up reaching out to HR. In fact, it was more of it was a networking event in the company. And I started talking to somebody who was working over in HR, and we started talking about some of the Windows login failures that we were seeing. Now, one thing that came very quickly over to us was people were working overtime. They were working on weekends. They were working, these were legitimate logins. They weren't bad logins, but they were working after hours. And I said, hey, we've got some very interesting information within our platform of just some of the very random logins that we're seeing that are legitimate logins, but showing that people are working way overboard than what they normally are. We ended up giving a little bit of that data, and we scrubbed usernames and all of that. It was a very generic data set that we gave over to HR. What I found, though, was that got into the minds of some of the CXO types, is that cybersecurity does a very, very good job of going through alerts, making sure that the company is safe, but at the same time, we do have other data out there. So the challenge that I give to you is to look at the data that you're seeing and see does it help any other group? And does it help your career and also the career of the cybersecurity group at hand to start talking about your data a little bit more and start talking about how you can, not will, but can help look at other groups and help them augment with their data platforms. I think you'll find out as well that many, and I had heard this in another conversation, many groups have different product sets. And if they're looking to save money or if they don't need to have those product sets anymore, then hey, you know what? If cybersecurity is that end-all be-all, or the SIEM solution is that end-all be-all of all the data, boy, that's good for your careers. And that is good for upper management as well for the next years of budgetary movements and making sure that your group has what it needs. You know, I'll end with this. Unity is strength, and when there is teamwork and collaboration, wonderful things can be achieved. And I love the quote because teamwork is not just in cybersecurity, and it's not just in IT. It's with all the different groups within an organization. And if you could pull all of that data together and pull those groups together, I think you'll be really, really surprised to see how well what we're doing with a SIEM, within cybersecurity, also reaches out to a lot of different organizations within your own organization. I'd like to open it up to any questions.